In a world where nearly every moment can be captured and shared instantly, evil can no longer hide in the shadows. This is the story of a cruel act that would have once vanished into obscurity, but instead ignited a firestorm of public outrage, proving that in the digital age, justice can arrive with the speed of a viral video, and reminding us that how we treat the most vulnerable reveals the true nature of our character. The events unfolded on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon in the suburban community of Oak Ridge, a middle-class neighborhood where tree-lined streets met small businesses, where people generally knew their neighbors, and where life proceeded with the comfortable predictability of American suburbia. It was the kind of place where nothing truly shocking ever happened, until the day when everything changed in the span of 30 horrifying seconds. Meet Cooper, a 4-year-old Jack Russell Terrier with a white coat splashed with tan markings, and eyes that seemed to communicate more intelligence than many humans possessed. His energy was legendary in the neighborhood, his small body containing seemingly endless reserves of enthusiasm that endeared him to everyone he encountered, from children who delighted in his playful antics to seniors who smiled at his boundless zest for life. Olivia Reyes had adopted Cooper from a rescue organization when he was just 6 months old, saving him from an uncertain fate after his previous owners surrendered him for being too energetic, a characteristic that Olivia, a physical therapist with a passion for morning runs, considered a perfect match for her active lifestyle. Together, they had formed the kind of bond that transforms a pet into family, their routines and rhythms perfectly synchronized after years of shared life. Their home sat on Cypress Avenue, a pleasant street where most houses featured small, well-maintained yards, separated from the sidewalk by low fences or hedges, boundaries that were more symbolic than functional, creating the illusion of private space while remaining inviting to passing neighbors. Cooper had a designated spot in the front bay window where he would watch the neighborhood activities with keen interest, his tail a metronome of excitement when Olivia returned home each evening. Then there was Devin Morales, 28 years old and relatively new to the food delivery business that had expanded exponentially during the pandemic and remained strong even as the world returned to normalcy. With his motorcycle and smartphone, he had found flexible work that accommodated his other pursuits, though most customers would have been concerned to learn that those pursuits included a growing gambling debt and a temper that flared unpredictably when things didn't go his way. Delivery app that employed Devin, like most in the industry, operated on a ruthless efficiency model where minutes meant money, where drivers were tracked by GPS, and where customer ratings could make the difference between maintaining access to the platform or being cut off from this source of income. This pressure cooker environment rewarded speed above all else, creating conditions where small frustrations could quickly compound into dangerous stress levels. On this particular afternoon, Devin was already running behind schedule, his normally reliable motorcycle having stalled twice, causing delays that the algorithm tracking his performance would penalize. 3 deliveries remained in his queue, each with a promised arrival time that now seemed impossible to meet, each representing a potential negative review that could affect his already precarious rating on the platform. The weather that day was seasonably warm for early June, the kind of perfect early summer day that brought people outdoors to garden, walk, or simply enjoy the sunshine after months of winter confinement. Olivia had left work early to take advantage of the beautiful weather, planning to spend the afternoon working on her small vegetable garden while Cooper explored the yard, his nose cataloging the fascinating scents that constituted his version of neighborhood news. Zoe Tucker, a college student who had recently moved into the apartment complex across from Olivia's house, was enjoying her own version of the perfect summer day. Having just completed her final exams, she was celebrating her temporary freedom by sitting on her small balcony, scrolling through social media, and occasionally filming snippets of the picturesque street for her modestly popular social media account, where she documented small-town aesthetic for followers who romanticized suburban life. It was pure chance that Zoe happened to be recording at the exact moment when Cooper, excited by a squirrel darting across the street, found an unlatched gate, Olivia having returned through the side entrance and not yet checked the front yard security. With the territorial determination unique to terriers, Cooper shot through the opening and across the street, focused entirely on the squirrel that had taken refuge in a tree directly in the path of an approaching motorcycle. Devin saw the small white dog dart into the street too late to stop completely, swerving sharply to avoid a direct collision, the maneuver causing his already precarious stack of delivery orders to shift precariously in their insulated bag. Though he managed to avoid hitting Cooper, the near miss caused his front wheel to clip the curb, sending a jolt through the motorcycle and dislodging one of the food containers, which tumbled to the pavement and burst open, spreading its contents across the asphalt. What happened next occurred in a sequence so rapid yet so clearly defined that later, when Zoe's video was analyzed frame by frame across social media platforms and news broadcasts, viewers could pinpoint the exact moment when irritation transformed into unconscionable cruelty. Devin stabilized his motorcycle, looked down at the spilled food, then at Cooper, who had abandoned his squirrel chase and was now curiously approaching the scattered food, and made a decision that would change multiple lives in an instant. With a swift, deliberate movement that could not possibly be misconstrued as accidental, Devin reached down, grabbed Cooper by the scruff of his neck, and flung the dog away from his motorcycle with shocking force. The small terrier's body arced through the air, a white blur against the blue sky before landing with a sickening thud on the pavement several yards away, his yelp of pain and surprise cutting through the previously peaceful afternoon like a knife. Zoe's gasp was audible on the video, her hand momentarily shaking as she registered what she had just witnessed before steadying to continue recording, an instinctive recognition that what was happening needed to be documented. The frame captured Devin's face clearly as he glanced around, his expression shifting from anger to a flicker of something that might have been regret, or perhaps simply awareness that his action might have been observed. Across the street, Olivia emerged from her backyard, drawn by Cooper's unmistakable cry of pain. Her expression transformed from confusion to horror as she took in the scene. Her beloved dog lying motionless on the pavement, the scattered food, Devin still astride his motorcycle, now hastily gathering the remaining delivery orders. "Cooper!" she cried, running toward the small, still form with the desperate speed of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. "What happened? What did you do?" Olivia's questions cut through the air as she knelt beside Cooper, her hands hovering uncertainly over his body, afraid to move him but desperate to help. The small dog was breathing, but his eyes were unfocused, and a thin trickle of blood ran from his mouth, signs that sent ice through Olivia's veins as her physical therapist's knowledge supplied possible diagnoses: internal injuries, broken ribs, traumatic brain injury. Devin's response was a masterclass in deflection, his hands raised in a gesture of innocence that would later be contrasted with Zoe's video evidence. "Dog ran into the street, lady. I swerved to avoid hitting him and crashed. He must have gotten hurt when he ran back across." The lie came with practiced ease, his tone suggesting that if anyone was at fault, it was Olivia for not controlling her pet, a perspective he clearly expected would be accepted without question. "He didn't run back anywhere," came a voice from across the street. Zoe had descended from her balcony, phone still recording, anger and determination overriding her usual social anxiety. "I saw everything. I recorded everything." She held up her phone as evidence, her hand steady now with purpose. "You picked him up and threw him. I have it all on video." These simple statements shattered Devin's constructed narrative, replacing it with the brutal truth that would soon reach far beyond this suburban street. For a moment, time seemed suspended in a tableau of moral reckoning, Olivia cradling Cooper's injured form, Zoe standing firm with her damning evidence, Devin frozen between the impulse to flee and the realization that technology had stripped away his ability to escape accountability. Around them, neighbors began to emerge from houses, drawn by the commotion, forming an impromptu jury whose shocked expressions reflected the community's instant judgment. When Devin finally spoke, his words revealed the desperation of someone watching their options rapidly disappear. "Look, it was an accident. The dog made me crash and ruined a delivery I can't afford to lose. I just reacted. I didn't mean to hurt it. Can we just forget about this?" His plea fell on deaf ears, its self-serving logic only cementing the impression of someone concerned solely with their own interests rather than the suffering they had caused. "I need to get him to a vet immediately," Olivia said, ignoring Devin's attempts at justification as she carefully gathered Cooper into her arms, her movements gentle but urgent. The small dog whimpered at being moved, a sound that cut through Olivia with physical pain, but also brought incredible relief. He was conscious, responsive, alive. "Someone help me, please. "I can't drive and hold him at the same time." Multiple neighbors stepped forward at once, offering assistance, cars, phone calls to the nearest emergency veterinary clinic. The supportive response was immediate and coordinate, a recognition of the bond between Olivia and Cooper that many had witnessed over years of morning walks and friendly encounters. Within moments, an older woman named Mrs. Patel had pulled her car alongside the curb, its back door already open to receive Olivia and her injured companion. "You're not going anywhere," another neighbor, a retired police officer named Frank Sullivan, told Devin, stepping into the path of the motorcycle as the delivery driver appeared ready to leave. "The police need to see this video and take your statement." Frank's tone was calm but authoritative, his stance making it clear that any attempt to depart would be physically challenged, a community enforcing its moral boundaries in real time. Devin's face cycled through emotions, anger, fear, calculation, before settling into a mask of resignation. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, though the fight had gone out of his voice. "It's just a dog. I didn't even hit it with my bike. Now my whole day is ruined because of this?" His inability to grasp the severity of his actions, to see Cooper as anything more than an inconvenience rather than a living being worthy of basic decency, was evident in every word. As Olivia departed for the veterinary clinic, Zoe found herself the unexpected center of attention, neighbors gathering around to view her footage, expressions of shock and outrage growing with each replay. "You need to post this," urged a middle-aged woman, whose own dog, a golden retriever, pressed anxiously against her leg as if sensing the disturbance in the human emotional field. "People like that shouldn't be allowed to get away with hurting animals. The delivery company needs to see this." The question of whether to share the video publicly created a moment of genuine ethical conflict for Zoe. On one hand, her social media presence had always been about aesthetic beauty and positive content. Sharing something so disturbing felt contrary to the brand she had carefully built. On the other hand, the moral imperative to expose cruelty and seek justice resonated deeply with her personal values. In this collision between online persona and real-world ethics, the decision would reveal much about her character. While Zoe grappled with this dilemma, the police arrived, 2 officers responding to multiple calls from the neighborhood. Their approach was professional but not dismissive, taking statements from multiple witnesses and reviewing Zoe's video with appropriate gravity rather than minimizing the incident as just about a dog. Their response reflected an evolving understanding in law enforcement that animal cruelty often signaled broader patterns of concerning behavior. Frank, the retired officer, pulled one of the responding policemen aside for a quiet conversation, gesturing toward Devin with a seriousness that suggested more was being communicated than immediately apparent. Later, it would emerge that Frank had recognized Devin from a community alert, a suspicious person reportedly photographing houses in a nearby neighborhood, possibly casing them for potential burglaries. Connection, though not immediately relevant to Cooper's injury, added another layer to the unfolding story. As the police completed their investigation, asking Zoe to email her video as evidence and informing Devin that animal cruelty charges were being considered, the delivery driver's demeanor shifted from resignation to panic. "This will destroy me," he said, his earlier bravado crumbling. "The delivery app will deactivate me. I've got bills, debts. I need this job." For the first time, a glimpse of the precarious economic reality underlying his actions became visible, though it explained rather than excused the cruelty he had displayed. While the neighborhood buzzed with the aftermath of the incident, Olivia sat in the sterile waiting room of Lakeside Emergency Veterinary Clinic, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. Cooper had been whisked away for examination immediately upon arrival, the staff responding with appropriate urgency to what they classified as a trauma case. The 43 minutes she had been waiting felt like an eternity, each second stretching with the particular torture of helplessness and uncertainty. Dr. Anita Sharma finally emerged from the treatment area, her face composed in the professional mask that experienced veterinarians develop, revealing enough compassion to connect with distraught pet owners while maintaining enough detachment to deliver difficult news if necessary. "Ms. Reyes," she said, taking a seat beside Olivia, "Cooper has sustained significant injuries, but he's stable for now. We've done initial x-rays and assessment." The diagnosis was both better and worse than Olivia had feared. Cooper had 3 broken ribs, a fractured front leg, and concerning bruising around his abdomen that suggested possible internal bleeding requiring monitoring. The impact had also caused a mild concussion, though thankfully there were no signs of severe brain trauma. "A fighter," Dr. Sharma said, her professional reserve softening slightly. "But he's not out of the woods yet. We need to do surgery to set his leg properly and check for internal injuries." The estimated cost of Cooper's treatment, over $3,000 for emergency surgery, overnight monitoring, follow-up care and potential complications, created another moment of crisis for Olivia. As a physical therapist at a small practice, she earned a solid but not extravagant income, and recent car repairs had depleted her emergency fund. The amount represented a significant financial blow, but the alternative was unthinkable. "Do whatever he needs," she told Dr. Sharma, pushing aside financial concerns for the more immediate priority of Cooper's survival. While signing the treatment authorization forms, Olivia's phone began buzzing with notifications, texts, calls, and social media alerts flooding in with such frequency that she initially assumed something must be wrong with the device. That quick glance revealed the cause. Zoe had made her decision about the video, posting it to her social media account with a straightforward caption, "Delivery driver throws dog who got in his way. This happened an hour ago. Please share to identify this man and the company he works for. Animal cruelty, fortune, justice." The video had already accumulated over 50,000 views in less than 20 minutes, the rapid spread propelled by a combination of factors that created a perfect viral storm. The clear cruelty captured in high definition, the contrast between innocent dog and callous perpetrator, the identifiable logo on Devin's delivery bag, and the simple emotional hashtags that placed the content into algorithmic streams already primed for moral outrage. The internet's capacity for both overwhelming harm and remarkable good was revealing itself in real time. Comments were pouring in by the hundreds, then thousands, expressions of horror and sympathy, calls for justice, users tagging the delivery company demanding action, others trying to identify Devin through screenshots, some sharing their own stories of delivery driver misconduct or animal abuse they had witnessed. The collective emotional response was creating something powerful and dangerous simultaneously. A digital mob united by righteous indignation, but untethered from due process or proportional response. The flood of notifications was a direct message from Zoe. "I hope Cooper is okay. I'm so sorry this happened. The video is getting a lot of attention. The delivery company has already responded saying they're investigating. I wanted you to know before things get crazy. Do you want me to take it down?" The thoughtfulness of the message, considering Olivia's perspective despite the attention Zoe was receiving, spoke to a maturity beyond the college student's years. Olivia stared at her phone, torn between gratitude for the support and alarm at the rapidly building digital firestorm. Never sought public attention, had deliberately kept her social media presence minimal and private. Now, through no choice of her own, she and Cooper were becoming the central figures in a viral narrative spreading beyond their control. Yet within this discomfort was recognition. The video might ensure justice in a way that individual police reports could not. Her reply to Zoe was carefully considered. "Thank you for documenting what happened. Cooper is in surgery but expected to recover. Please keep the video up. People should know this kind of cruelty exists, but maybe edit to focus on the company's responsibility rather than identifying the individual driver." This response revealed Olivia's character, seeking accountability without vengeance, justice without destruction, a balance that the digital mob rarely achieved in its hunger for retribution. Early evening, the video had crossed platforms, moving from social media to Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, each transition amplifying its reach exponentially. Local news stations had picked up the story, contacting both Zoe and Olivia for interviews and additional footage. The delivery company had issued a formal statement condemning the act, announcing Devin's immediate termination and promising to cover Cooper's veterinary expenses, a corporate response that balanced legal caution with necessary public relations damage control. In the veterinary clinic, Cooper was emerging from surgery, the procedure to set his broken leg successful, though the internal bruising remained a concern requiring ongoing monitoring. Dr. Sharma allowed Olivia a brief visit to the recovery area where Cooper lay on a padded surface connected to monitoring equipment, small body appearing even more fragile beneath bandages and medical paraphernalia. The sight caused Olivia's carefully maintained composure to finally crack, tears streaming down her face as she gently stroked the small patch of fur not covered by bandages or IV lines. "The next 24 hours are critical," Dr. Sharma explained, compassion evident in her voice as she watched Olivia's reaction. "But his vitals are strong, and small dogs often recover from trauma more quickly than we expect. You should go home and rest. We'll call immediately if there's any change." The suggestion was reasonable, medically sound, yet the thought of leaving Cooper alone in this sterile environment, confused and in pain, created a physical ache in Olivia's chest that no logical argument could address. While Olivia wrestled with this emotional dilemma, Devin was facing consequences that extended beyond his terminated employment. The police, influenced by the viral video and multiple witness statements, had decided to pursue charges of animal cruelty, a misdemeanor in their state, but one that carried potential jail time and fines. His motorcycle had been impounded for inspection, a routine procedure that nonetheless left him without transportation, stranded in a neighborhood where his face was now known and despised. His attempts to secure a rideshare had proven futile. 3 consecutive drivers had cancelled after arriving and recognizing him from the now ubiquitous video playing across social media. This unexpected consequence of viral infamy, the sudden inability to access basic services, had never occurred to Devin, who was experiencing in real time how digital reputation could translate into tangible social ostracism. Each cancellation drove home the severity of his situation in ways that formal charges had not. Night fell, 2 parallel vigils took place. Olivia, having refused to leave despite Dr. Sharma's advice, dozed fitfully in an uncomfortable chair beside Cooper's recovery kennel, waking at each small sound to check his status. And Zoe, unable to sleep amid the continuing notifications and messages flooding her phone, monitoring the unfolding digital response to her video, with increasing concern about forces she had set in motion but could no longer control. Both women, previously unknown to each other, now connected through circumstance and shared concern for a small dog whose suffering had inadvertently sparked something much larger than either had anticipated. The turning point came at 3:17 a.m. when Cooper's vital signs suddenly deteriorated, his oxygen levels dropping, heart rate becoming erratic. The overnight veterinary staff responded immediately, discovering internal bleeding that had resumed despite the surgical intervention hours earlier. The next 2 hours became a desperate race against time. Additional procedures performed with emergency precision, blood transfusions administered, Cooper's small body fighting with the tenacity that defined his species and his particular spirit. By dawn, the crisis had passed. Cooper stabilized once more, though now considered in guarded rather than stable condition. Dr. Sharma called in despite having left only hours earlier, explained to an exhausted Olivia that the renewed bleeding had been addressed, but had revealed more extensive internal damage than initially identified. He's not out of danger yet, but he's still fighting, and that's significant. The next 48 hours will tell us more about his prognosis for recovery. The days that followed unfolded with the peculiar duality of private struggle amid public attention. Cooper's condition remained critical, but slowly stabilizing. Each small improvement, a stronger heartbeat, improved oxygen levels, the first tentative wag of his tail when he recognized Olivia's voice, celebrated as victories in the ongoing battle for his recovery. The veterinary staff had grown attached to their small patient, his resilience in the face of trauma inspiring an extra level of care and attention rarely afforded in their busy emergency practice. Meanwhile, the video of the incident continued its viral journey, reaching national news outlets and animal welfare organizations. What had begun as a local incident had transformed into a flashpoint for conversations about gig economy pressures, corporate responsibility, animal welfare laws, and the power of social media to both expose wrongdoing and potentially destroy lives. Hashtags like Tanja Justice for Cooper and Tanja Delivery Driver Cruelty trended across platforms, creating a digital ecosystem of outrage, advocacy, and occasional nuanced discussion. The delivery company, recognizing both a PR crisis and an opportunity to demonstrate corporate values, had gone beyond their initial statement. They announced a comprehensive review of driver screening procedures, mandatory animal awareness training for all delivery personnel, and a substantial donation to local animal welfare organizations. Their representatives had also contacted Olivia directly, not only covering Cooper's medical expenses as promised, but establishing a fund for other injured animals whose owners couldn't afford emergency care. For Zoe, the experience had proven transformative in unexpected ways. A social media following had exploded from a modest 8,000 to over 300,000 in less than a week, bringing opportunities but also challenges she had never anticipated. Animal welfare organizations reached out for collaborations, news programs requested interviews, and companies offered sponsorships. A sudden flood of attention that both excited and overwhelmed the college student who had only intended to document a wrong, not launch a platform. More meaningful than the numbers was the shift in Zoe's content and purpose. What had begun as an aesthetic-focused account now incorporated advocacy, using her expanded platform to highlight animal welfare issues, promote local rescues, and encourage responsible pet ownership. The transition wasn't without criticism. Some followers accused her of exploiting Cooper's suffering for fame. Others questioned her qualifications to address complex issues, but Zoe navigated these challenges with increasing confidence and authenticity. 7 days after the incident, Cooper was finally deemed stable enough for discharge, though his recovery would continue for weeks under Olivia's attentive care. The moment of leaving the veterinary clinic became another unintended public event. Several news crews had gathered outside, alerted by hospital staff or social media to the timing of Cooper's release. The image of Olivia carrying Cooper, now wearing a cast on his front leg and protective wrapping around his ribcage, became another viral moment in their ongoing story. Olivia had initially resisted media attention, wanting only to focus on Cooper's recovery, rather than becoming the face of a cause she hadn't chosen. But as days passed and the story maintained its momentum, she recognized an opportunity to channel the public interest towards something constructive. In her first formal interview, given to a local news station from her living room where Cooper rested beside her, she spoke not of vengeance, but of responsibility, for pets, for communities, and for how we respond to moments of moral testing. What happened to Cooper was terrible, she said, her hand gently stroking his head as he dozed, medication still making him drowsier than his normally energetic self. But what's happened since has shown me how much good exists in the world. From the neighbors who helped immediately, to the veterinary team who saved his life, to people we've never met donating to animal welfare causes in Cooper's name, this has become about something much larger than one incident or one person's cruel choice. The interview marked a turning point in the narrative, a shift from outrage to something more constructive and forward-looking. Olivia's measured response, refusing to demonize Devin while still holding him accountable, created space for a conversation about systemic issues rather than individual vilification. Her emphasis on the community's response, rather than the initial cruelty, offered a template for engaging with difficult events that social media algorithms rarely prioritized, but that many viewers found refreshing. For Devin, the consequences continued to unfold with inexorable momentum. The criminal charges had been formalized: animal cruelty and destruction of property, with his initial court appearance revealing the damage the incident had inflicted on his own life. Unable to secure new employment due to his viral infamy, behind on rent, and facing legal fees he couldn't afford, he presented a figure dramatically transformed from the aggressive delivery driver captured in Zoe's video, subdued, visibly stressed, and seemingly bewildered by how quickly his life had unraveled. The court assigned Devin a public defender, a no-nonsense attorney named Maritza Jimenez, who specialized in cases involving vulnerable clients. After reviewing the evidence and Devin's personal circumstances, she proposed an unusual arrangement to the prosecutor: a guilty plea with a suspended sentence, contingent on completion of community service at an animal shelter, mandatory anger management therapy, and financial restitution that would be feasible given Devin's economic situation. The approach sought accountability without destruction, rehabilitation rather than mere punishment. Perhaps most surprising was Olivia's response when consulted about this proposal by the district attorney's office. Despite having every reason to demand maximum penalties, she supported the rehabilitative approach, with one addition. She requested that part of Devin's community service include educational presentations about his experience and the consequences of his actions, particularly to delivery drivers and others working in high-stress service positions where momentary impulses could lead to lasting harm. 3 weeks after Cooper came home, with his physical recovery progressing well despite continued pain and limited mobility, a letter arrived at Olivia's house, handwritten, the envelope marked with no return address. The contents were unexpected. A lengthy, seemingly genuine apology from Devon, expressing remorse not just for the injury to Cooper, but for the broader impact of his actions. "I've had time to think about what I did and why," he wrote. "It wasn't about your dog. It was about me not knowing how to handle pressure and stress without exploding. I'm working on that now. I know words don't fix anything, but I needed you to know I'm sorry." The letter created another moment of moral complexity for Olivia, the challenge of responding to apparent genuine remorse from someone who had caused such harm. After careful consideration, she wrote back, a brief note acknowledging his apology and expressing hope for his continued work on anger management. "Cooper is recovering," she concluded. "I hope you can rebuild your life too, but with better tools for handling difficulties. That would give some meaning to what happened." This exchange, private and modest compared to the public spectacle the incident had generated, represented something social media algorithms couldn't easily categorize or amplify: the messy, nuanced reality of human error, consequence, remorse, and possible redemption. It existed outside the dramatic arcs of viral content, yet contained perhaps the most meaningful development in the entire story. Two people finding a path toward resolution that acknowledged harm without demanding destruction. As Cooper's physical wounds healed, his cast eventually removed, his ribs knitting back together, his energy slowly returning, the public attention gradually waned, as it inevitably does in the relentless cycle of viral moments. New outrageous videos captured collective attention, new hashtags trended, and the spotlight that had briefly illuminated Cooper, Olivia, Zoe, and Devin shifted elsewhere, leaving them to continue their individual journeys largely unobserved. 6 months after that fateful Wednesday afternoon, Cooper raced across the newly fenced yard of Olivia's home, his compact body displaying no visible evidence of the trauma that had nearly claimed his life. His recovery had been complete in the physical sense. Bones healed, internal injuries resolved, energy fully restored. The only lingering sign was a slight hesitation around unfamiliar men, a wariness that emerged in specific situations before his natural friendliness reasserted itself. A small psychological scar carried alongside the physical ones hidden beneath his white and tan fur. The incident had transformed Olivia's life in ways both subtle and profound. Her relationship with Cooper had deepened through the weeks of intensive care, medication schedules, physical therapy exercises, and gradual rehabilitation. What had already been a loving bond became something almost sacred, a connection tempered by shared trauma and recovery, by the awareness of how quickly the ordinary gift of daily companionship could have been lost forever. More unexpected were the community connections that had emerged and persisted long after media attention faded. Neighbors who had previously exchanged nothing more than casual greetings now stopped to chat, invited Olivia to local events, checked in on Cooper's well-being. Mrs. Patel, who had driven them to the veterinary clinic that first day, had become a regular visitor, bringing homemade treats for both Olivia and Cooper. The neighborhood had transformed from a collection of adjacent houses into something more cohesive, a community united initially by outrage, but sustained by genuine caring. For Zoe, the experience had redirected her professional aspirations. Her communications major now had clear purpose. She was interning with a national animal welfare organization, helping develop their social media strategy and educational campaigns. The challenges of sudden online visibility had taught her valuable lessons about digital ethics, responsibility, and the complex relationship between documentation and exploitation. Lessons she was now applying to intentional advocacy rather than accidental viral fame. The delivery company had made good on its promises, implementing new training protocols and continuing to fund the emergency veterinary care program established in Cooper's name. Their response had become a case study in corporate crisis management, presented in business schools as an example of effective reputation repair. More significantly, other delivery services had adopted similar initiatives, creating a ripple effect of industry change sparked by one viral incident. Devin Morales had completed his mandated community service at the county animal shelter, where his initial reluctance had gradually transformed into something approaching engagement. The shelter director noted that while he had never become an enthusiastic animal lover, he had developed genuine respect for the creatures in his care and had proven particularly effective in maintaining the facility, fixing broken kennels, repairing fencing, and applying his mechanical skills to improve living conditions for the sheltered animals. The educational presentations required by his sentence had evolved from perfunctory obligation to something more authentic. Speaking to groups of delivery drivers about stress management and impulse control, Devin drew on his own experience with unexpected candor. "I lost everything in 30 seconds of anger that was caught on camera, but even if no one had been filming, it still would have been wrong. The camera didn't create the consequence, it just made sure I couldn't escape it." This message, coming from someone who had lived the experience rather than an abstract authority figure, resonated with audiences in ways more formal training often failed to achieve. Perhaps most remarkable was the unlikely connection that had formed between Olivia and Devin. After his formal apology and her acknowledgement, they had no contact for months. Then, as part of his probation requirements, Devin needed to demonstrate ongoing commitment to restitution. With his probation officer's approval, he had reached out to Olivia with an unusual offer: landscaping services for her yard, including the installation of a more secure fence to prevent any future escapes by Cooper. The initial work was completed in Olivia's absence by mutual agreement, the situation still too fraught for comfortable direct interaction. But as weeks passed and Devin returned for maintenance visits, brief, awkward exchanges gradually evolved into substantive conversations. These interactions never approached friendship. The harm done created boundaries that both acknowledged, but they achieved something perhaps more meaningful, a real-world example of restorative justice, where accountability, amends, and growth coexisted without requiring either artificial forgiveness or permanent condemnation. For Cooper, oblivious to the complex human dynamics his suffering had catalyzed, life had returned to its joyful simplicity: walks with Olivia, games of fetch in the secure yard, treats from adoring neighbors, naps in sunbeams that fell across the living room floor. His resilience offered a wordless lesson to all who had become invested in his story, about living fully in the present moment, about the capacity for healing when proper care is provided, about moving forward without being defined by past trauma. The video that had captured Cooper's ordeal remained online, now with an educational context and resources for animal welfare and reporting cruelty. It had been viewed millions of times, its comments section evolving from initial rage to more thoughtful discussions about animal rights, surveillance ethics, and proportional justice. The digital artifact had taken on a life beyond its creator's intentions, becoming a touchstone for ongoing conversations about responsibility in both physical and virtual spaces. The story of Cooper, Olivia, Zoe, and Devin would never have a neat conclusion. Real life rarely provides the satisfying closure of fictional narratives, but in its messy, complicated reality lay perhaps its greatest value. A reminder that moments captured on camera represent both endings and beginnings, that justice includes both accountability and opportunity for redemption, and that how we respond to cruelty as individuals and communities defines us more profoundly than the cruelty itself.